Recently, I've been thinking a lot about the idea of starting a sports card show in my hometown when I return. So in this video, I just wanted to share, as I've been doing research about this, looking at different YouTube videos of people who do start their own shows and reading different articles, I've been taking notes about things that I think are the most important things to think about if you're thinking about starting your own card show. So in this video, I wanted to go through some of these points that I've been learning about, just to share with you if you were thinking about starting your own sports card show. All right, the first thing to think about is, I guess you could think of this kind of like supply and demand. Like, are you in a location where there's actually a demand for a sports card show that's not already being met by some other card shows? You know, if you're in a town, like if you're in Dallas or something, you know, there's this Dallas card show, why would you start another show? So I think that's true with a lot of other places. You got to look in your region. What's the reality already? Is there a need for a card show? I don't think there's any reason to start a card show just for the sake of starting a card show. It's more if there's a need for it, then you can enter there. You know, one of the reasons I'm thinking about it, I mentioned in a video before for my hometown, is because there's no card shows in like a 2-hour region. There's only one in the whole state, and it's kind of like 2 hours away once a month. So my hometown makes sense as a possible place. I think that's going to be true in some other places here, but if you have a lot of shows, then there's no need to really do it, I would think. The second thing I've been learning about is the importance of finding a core group of dealers, people who will want to consistently have a table at your card show. You can't kind of reinvent the wheel every time and find new people for renting tables every single time. But if you can make connections with local card shop owners and other people who are actively involved in the sports card community locally who will want to have a table every time, then I think that is a really key part of this. Because at a minimum, you know, you don't want to have something where you can't find people to fill up the tables. You know, people who come and attend and there's just a couple of tables there, that even if the card show gets better later, those people aren't going to want to come back. They have this memory of it being a kind of a garbage card show. So you want to start off making sure you have a core group of people who will consistently be there. That way, even if a couple of people, you know, their life gets busy or whatever and they're not going to be there, you have enough tables where even if a few people do that, you still have a good show. So I think that's key. And as part of that, I think it's also important that that core group of people has a variety of stuff that they can have on offer. You know, if every single table has the same type of cards, then you're going to be attracting just a certain niche group of people to your card show. And it might be hard to sustain. You know, for example, if every single table only had ultra modern or only had vintage or only had sealed wax, you know, you might get some people who are there for that kind of thing. And then they'll be like, okay, that was that. You know, if they're not into that thing, they won't come to the next one. So I think it's important to make sure that you have within that core group of initial people a variety of different stuff, from vintage to ultra modern, from sealed wax to plenty of singles and slab cards and raw and budget boxes and all this kind of stuff. There needs to be enough within that core group of people. I think another thing is with that core group of people to make sure you have good quality communication. You know, if you're in a spot where there hasn't been regular card shows, those people, even if they own a local card shop, it doesn't mean they've really set up much at card shows in the past. So I think it's good to communicate with everybody in advance of some certain levels of expectation, you know, like to ask people to post the prices on the cards and other things like that that are very helpful for the buyers, so that the buyers have a really good experience. So I think it's good not to tell the dealers, you have to do this, you have to do this, but to have a consultation with them and discuss and be like, okay, how are we going to make this show really good? Here's some ideas that I have, you know, and they can share with each other some ideas. So I think having some form of communication with that core group of people who can learn with each other so that it can improve the quality of the show over time is going to be important as well. Another one is, you know, I mentioned sealed wax before. I think it's important to limit the number of retail products that are going to be up for sale in this card show. If it's something people can go to the Walmart to pick up, why are they going to do it from a local card shop? That doesn't give them anything unique or special to experience. So I think that's another thing to just, you know, share with dealers, not to tell them not to bring retail product, but to tell them to balance that and to not overdo that. You know, if it's just a small thing, whatever, fine. But you don't want people coming and then being like, why am I coming to this show when I can just go to Walmart? Another idea that I didn't even think about this at first, but at least one table set up needs to be supply related. You need a place where people, if they're buying cards, they might need to buy some cardboard boxes to take them home with. They might buy something in a budget box and then really want to have a top loader to put it in. It's just in a soft sleeve right now. So they need a table where they can go to and be like, wow, like I'm buying a lot more stuff than I thought. I need to go over there and get some supplies for all of this. So I think a table, at least one table that has a good amount of supplies, is going to be important. Now, another one is related to the venue itself. One suggestion that a lot of articles and videos I watched mentioned is to find a venue that can provide you with the tables and chairs. If you need to be renting tables and chairs from elsewhere, that is a massive headache. Not only do you have to get all that stuff in there and then have it all cleaned up at the end, but it's going to cost extra money. It's going to be complicated. A lot of venues will already have maybe just fold up plastic tables or something like that and some different chairs that the dealers can sit in that they just offer as part of their what they do for the venue. So it's going to be really important to find some place that has that for you. That will make everything a lot less complicated. In fact, you can probably communicate with them in advance and kind of say, okay, these are where I want all the tables to be lined up, so that you can have this all set up in advance. And that's going to be the other thing that I was going to mention here, is related to being set up in advance. You don't want to come in on the morning of and have it be chaos. That maybe the night before, if you can have the venue help you set up the tables, get everything set up so when the dealers come in early the next morning, everything is ready for them without having to have a whole bunch of chaos. You don't want to be, when the card show is getting started, you don't want to be hectic. If you're organizing this, you want to be able to go around and make sure everybody has what they need, everybody's setting up well, nobody needs any help with anything. If people are bringing in, crates of cards, like maybe you can be out there helping them carry in their boxes, stuff like this. You want to be available to help out and make sure everybody is starting things in a smooth way. And if you're hectically doing stuff with the venue at the last moment, then you're not going to be able to do that. So I think being well prepared in advance is going to be an important part of this. And with the venue as well, of course, the cost is going to be an important thing. You have to really, you'll have to think through the budget. I think, in my mind, you're putting in a lot of work. You're putting in a lot of effort, and you don't want to also be spending your own money to get this card show going. So you have to think about how much does it cost per table. Do you want to charge an entrance fee for people or make it free for people to come in? You kind of have to calculate all of that in based on the cost of the venue. If you can find a lower cost venue, then you can charge less for the tables and you don't have to charge an entry fee. But if it's a high cost for the venue, you're going to have to charge a higher price for the tables, and you're going to have to charge maybe a small entrance fee. So you have to really think about that if it's going to work. If you're just starting up and nobody has any kind of context on if it's a good show, people aren't going to spend much money to enter. If it's a $2 entry fee or something like that, maybe people will. But you have to really think about that. How if a $5 or $10 entry fee is a barrier for some people, then you got to try to work out your budget in a way where that's not going to affect things. And related to the entry fee, I would also suggest, if it's kids, don't charge anything. I don't know, maybe 15 and below for free completely, because I think it's nice to encourage kids to come. And just in general, I think it's nice to create an atmosphere that is friendly to different groups of people, so that kids can come in and, they have different things they can see, different things they can do. And then it doesn't become boring for them. So I think that's also good to keep in mind, that just having some tables and then a bunch of old people talking to other old people about old cards might get boring for the kids. So you got to think of different things that can engage them in meaningful ways. It can be simple, but just some different things. The other thing is about the regularity of it. I mean, when you're first doing your first card show, you're probably just thinking of it as a one-time event. But I would think that part of it is trying to figure out how to make the systems work in such a way where you can do this regularly. I wouldn't recommend trying to do it too regularly at the beginning. I've seen, if you look at some of the attendance at different big card shows like the Dallas Card Show, it goes ups and downs like this. And my feeling is a lot of that has to do with because of how frequent it is. If you have a card show that's happening every 2 months, it's really easy for people to just say, oh, I'm going to skip it this time. There's another one just 2 months away. I'll just wait for that one. So you don't want to have it so frequent that people feel that it's no problem to skip it. It's for both the dealers who are going to be there and for the people who want to come in to buy cards. You don't want to have it too frequent. So I would think, in my mind, when I'm thinking about it, I might even think of it as even just a one-time a year thing at the beginning. And if it's successful the first time, then maybe like, okay, I'm going to have this once every 6 months. I probably honestly wouldn't start with anything more frequent than that. If after the first, time, the second time, I could tell that, oh, like this, there's a need for this. Like people are really liking this. Maybe I would up it to once every 3 months at the very most frequent. That would be the most frequent I would consider going, I think, for something like this. I know there's a lot of shows that happen every month, and maybe there's some locations where a monthly show can really work. But personally, I think having it every 3 months is creates a little bit more of an event kind of mentality where it's a can't miss thing. If it's too frequent, it's too easy for people to just skip it. Now, another thing is thinking about the logistics of things beyond just the cards themselves. Things like, like if people get thirsty, is there something where a booth where they can go buy a cup of coffee, or a vending machine where they can buy a Coke or whatever? Is there those logistical things like that are going to be important? Is there some way of working with the venue can you ask some food trucks to come and park in the area or something? I don't know. If it's going to be a really small show, maybe that's not such a big deal. Or if your venue is really close to some different fast food restaurants or whatever, maybe it's not a big deal. But just to think about that in advance, if you're there and you're walking around for a couple hours and you have nowhere to get a bottle of water, like that's going to be a challenge for you. So to really think about the logistics of things. It also includes things like the temperature control, I forgot what show it was. There was some show where I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos about it, and everybody was like sweating and hot and uncomfortable because the air conditioner just didn't keep that room comfortable. So you have to think about things like that. Are you creating a comfortable experience? The floor, is it something where if people are walking around for multiple hours, are their legs gonna just get super tired? And if they do get tired, do they have a place they can sit down and just rest for a little bit and hang out? All these little logistical details I think are actually important to think about. You might not be able to make a perfect situation, especially if it's a new show and you don't know what kind of attendance is going to be there, but you can at least make sure you're thinking about all these logistical things. Another thing related to that is thinking about like beyond the, once the show closes, if this is a one-day show, which if it's a small location and it's the first time, it's probably going to be a one-day show, I'm guessing. Maybe you're going to do a Saturday, Sunday show. That's possible too. If you are going to do a 2-day show, then I would think about like what are some things you can have going on in that evening between the two, if like a trade night specifically. Is there some location where you could set something like that up? It doesn't need to be too complicated. People, when if they have a space, that's all they need is a space they can go to, and then just do whatever they're going to do with each other. But I think something like a trade night is appreciated by a lot of people. And maybe this isn't such a big deal if the only attendees are going to be local people who are just going to go home, going to come in for a couple hours and go home. But if you're actually getting to a point where you're bringing people in who are coming from, from an hour away, from 2 hours away, from other neighboring cities that don't have card shows, then there's a good chance they might be staying the night. So if you have some different things going on, at least a space for different things to go on, I think that's worth thinking about. The next is thinking about marketing. So I'm not an expert in marketing, but I would think that you want to have some outreach so that people know this event is going to happen. You're going to well in advance, you're going to have that outreach with the potential dealers, the people who are going to be having tables at your card show. That's going to be months in advance, probably, communicating with them, making sure that you have a group of people. But even for the people who are going to attend, you need to get some marketing materials out there. So for each location, that might look a little bit different. There might be local, like newspaper, kind of community newspaper things, or a little section in classified ads, or a Craigslist, or whatever it might be. But just making sure that you have the marketing out there, and making sure that the marketing, though it's trying to attract people, it's also real. I was watching one video that was talking about this card show. I think it was in the Northeast somewhere, where they would advertise for a certain number of tables, but then when people came, it was a fraction of that number, and it gave people a bad taste in their mouth for that card show. Even though the tables that were there were perfectly good, people had this specific expectation, and because that expectation wasn't met, they had a negative feeling about the show overall. Whereas if the show had just shared what it actually was, that it was actually a small show, then people probably would have gone there with the expectation it was a small show and be like, hey, that was a nice small show. So be authentic, be real, be truthful. I think that's true in marketing materials. That's true in general. So I think that's an important one. Another one is, think about having some sort of giveaway, some sort of prizes, some sort of just something like that. I think it's nice to say thank you to the people who are there, to make them feel appreciated, that you're creating this thing, not because you want a card show, that you want to find cards for yourself, but you're trying to create a community space. You're trying to create something that people really love, people really enjoy, and that you showing your appreciation for the people who are there is an important part of that. So I think things like little giveaways and stuff like that is important. And also, like I was saying before, activities for kids and different things for kids to go show that you're trying to make an effort to create a community space, which I think is really appreciated by a lot of people if you're truly doing that way. Now, one question I was looking up, because I was trying to figure out how much do most card shows charge for the people who are going to have a table. Because you have to think about this. When you're budgeting in everything, you have to think about how much you're going to charge, and you want to make sure that you're having the dealers who are going to run the tables pay an amount that's worth it for them, but that is also going to help you to at least be financially balanced. If it's a one-day show, different things I was reading online say that you could charge between $30 and $80 for a table for a one-day show. If it's a newer show, it's probably going to be down there closer to the lower end, like that $30 kind of range. And then if it's a two-day show, maybe at like in the $50 to $100 range again, if it's a newer show, to the lower end of that. So that's basically what people were suggesting that works for dealers, that can oftentimes make it balance out for the costs. And usually that cost would include the table, one table or however many tables they're ordering, as well as a chair or two, which should all be part of it. You shouldn't have to have the extra stuff for that. It would be nice, over time, if you're also able to get like displays for people. At the beginning, it might be necessary for people to figure out their own, just give them a table and that's it. They're going to have to figure out how to display it. But for the first show, that's probably going to be necessary, just because it's hard to, in my mind, unless this is going to become something you do very regularly, it's hard to think about investing in a lot of different like display cases and stuff at the very beginning. If the show ends up being very successful, then that might be something over time that you want to consider, that you encourage people to bring in their own displays. But if people want to set up at a table and they don't have it, that you have something you can rent to them. Over time, I think that's worth thinking about, because it makes it a lot easier for the dealer. And you do want to think like, what are the things you can do that make life easier for the dealer? That's going to be something that's going to make them want to return. It's going to make it much more sustainable for that card show to last long term, because the dealers can feel like you're helping them, that you're helping take care of their needs. I think people are people, and people are not going to expect you to be perfect. But if they can see that you're really truly making an effort to create something that makes their life easier and that makes this a better situation for them, they're going to appreciate that. And even if it's not perfect, I think most people are actually reasonable, even though you wouldn't think that by the media and looking at YouTube comments and stuff. Generally, in person, most people are reasonable, and I think if you can communicate with them and you can share what you're trying to do and try to get their experience and get feedback from them, and you're genuinely trying to improve the experience for them and for the buyers and for the venue, then it's gonna be helpful in your path to success. Now, as far as the other thing that I was looking up is, whether you should charge for the people attending the card show. Now, if it's possible to not charge, I think it's nice. But if you do need to charge, I think a $2 to $5 range of charge for a new show is probably as high as you'd want to go, with kids being free, at least 12 and under, or 15 and under, something like that, free. I think that's reasonable. People can pay that amount of money and it's not going to be a big deal. If you're a new show, though, you can't really go higher than that, because if you charge $10 and people don't know what to expect, a lot of people aren't going to come, because they're like, I don't know, maybe I walk around for half an hour and there's nothing there. It's not very interesting. People are willing to spend $2, maybe $5 on the off chance that it's good. But any more than that, and I would say, until you're really well established, don't charge more than that, is what seems to be the general recommendation when I look out there at what people say. Now, also related to money, I think when you're starting a card show, you can't think of it quite the same as starting a business. If you're starting a local card shop or some other business, like, you need to have a very clear path towards when you are going to be making money to support yourself and your family. With a card show, one single card show in one single town that's going to happen maybe once every 6 months or once every 12 months, I don't think you can quite think of it the same way. You do want to set up systems and stuff so that you're not losing money over time, but I think you probably are not going to be thinking about making a whole lot of money from a card show. I think the idea is to create a space that maybe the money you're making ends up eventually coming from the cards that you're able to buy, and things like that. And I think that you can't think of it too much as a business at the beginning, unless, if you're doing this multiple locations, and you could build a way to build a business out of this. I think there are people who are kind of like into the sports card show business, and they are able to get more and more and get sponsors, and they have, more complex processes and things like that, and it's possible. But just for a small local show, I think the idea here is, financial wise, like, try to break even. If you can break even, I think you've succeeded. If over time you can make a tiny little bit of money, maybe that's fine, but I don't think this is an effort to make, if specifically you're thinking of this as a money-making enterprise. Another suggestion a lot of people had is to try to make sure that your first show has a minimum of 30 tables. A small show, something that's 15 or 20 tables, it's really so small that you're not gonna be able to charge anything. It might not be worth it. You don't know, unless you have 15 amazing tables that are really exceptional tables, it's not gonna attract that many people. So generally people are saying like try to start off with at least a minimum of 30 and to actually have even more than that, because you never know at the last moment if somebody's gonna have to back out or something like that. If you have not enough tables and then a couple of people have to back out, it looks empty. So be ready for that. Also, if people do back out, have a plan for that. Either maybe you're going to set up some of your own stuff in that empty table, or maybe you can give whoever's next to that table who somebody backed out, you'd be like, hey, you can have this table for free. You can set up stuff here, just so that it doesn't look empty. You don't want to have people coming in and then see, a couple of tables that are empty. It gives a feeling that this is not a very good show. So make sure there's something to fill up that space if something does get empty at the last moment. The next one is just generally be very organized with everything. Like where the table is, how big the table is. Tell the dealers in advance exactly the proportions and the location. Have like a map, that you've drawn up for where all the tables are, so they know exactly where it is. Be very organized. What time is the doors going to open? What's the expectation for when they close? And so everybody knows everything. There's not confusion. You're very organized, very clear about everything right from the get-go in your own mind, and then you can communicate that to others. Another really small thing that was suggested, this one was suggested by the there's this YouTube channel, I think it's called like Behind the Diamond or something. It's this guy, I think he's in Philadelphia, has a really cool accent, and he's talking about his experience setting up card shows. It's a great channel for this kind of thing, so I would recommend going and checking out some of what he said. But he was saying one thing that he's found really helpful is bringing a few hand trucks with you. So because a lot of dealers who come, they have so much stuff that they want to bring in, but it's tough to bring in a box at a time. But if you have some hand carts for them to borrow, they can bring in a lot at once. And then a similar thing, if you can be there to help them, be like, hey, I have this hand cart, can I help you carry in stuff? Again, to make that dealer feel that you're helping them, that you're there for them, that they're getting support, that you're part of a community. That's going to be helpful. At the show, if you are planning on making this a regular thing, have some materials on hand to share about the next one. Maybe it's 6 months down the road, but at least if they leave knowing that this is happening again, then it enters their mind as not just a one and done thing, but as a something that they'll return to, especially if they had a good experience, So make sure that when you're handing those out, maybe it's in connection with when you're doing the giveaways, maybe maybe it's as they're leaving, but make sure they've had a good experience, and then they invite them to come back to this again in 6 months or whenever you're having it. And similarly, at the end of the show, also try to get some level of commitment from the dealers to see if they want to come back to the show. They don't have to sign up for it again. If it's 6 months down the road, it's too far in advance. But to at least get some general, what's their intention? Would they like to come back 6 months later? So that you can make sure that they are also thinking about it that way too, because you don't want to have to re-invite everybody from scratch every time. But if people kind of have this expectation, then it's going to be easier to sustain. And related to that, even if you do get this kind of verbal confirmation from people, you want to follow up regularly. So, if you've had, even in the first show, you probably are going to get people for weeks or even a couple months in advance, get people to sign up. But the week before the show, communicate with everybody again. Be like, hey, you're still coming, right? Is there any help you need? This kind of thing. And make sure, get their final commitments for things a week before the show. And then also similarly, after the show, get a general verbal intention for 6 months, for when the next show is 6 months later or 3 months later or whatever it is. But then also follow up with them when it gets closer to that time to make sure and to see what help they need. Learning from the recent National, make sure there's Wi-Fi, and the Wi-Fi is going to be solid for everybody. It's just a general thing. I mean, Wi-Fi should be around. And in the card world where people use, apps and eBay previous sales to figure out, what they're going to pay, Wi-Fi is particularly important. So make sure that's set up for people. Another just really small logistical thing, bring along a bunch of extra small supplies, extra pens, extra price stickers, paper, just things like that people might not think about, the fact that they might need this. Be like, oh, I wish I had a piece of paper to take some notes on, I'm doing this bulk deal and I can't keep in my mind like how all the prices are working. I just wish I had a little piece of paper I could just take some quick notes on. Have that kind of stuff around. And price tags, if people haven't put prices up or they forgot on a handful of their cards and they didn't bring their own price tag, have a few of those kinds of things on hand. I think it's useful. And then the other thing is to actually capture your learning in some kind of way. What I mean by that is, the dealers are going to have positive and negative experiences. The people who are there buying are going to have positive and negative experiences. You want to have a general sense of what those are. With the dealers, I think that's the easiest thing to do. You just need to communicate with people during the time and after the time. Be like, hey, how'd everything go? Is there anything that could be done next time to make this a little better for you? What do you think your customers' experiences were like? Is there anything that could be done to make their experiences better? Like, just have communication with people about that kind of stuff. People are, they want to share that stuff. One thing that I think is nice is especially at least for the very first show, don't plan on setting up your own booth if you have to be there doing the selling of the cards. If somebody else can sell the cards for you, fine, set up your own booth. But for the first show in particular, you want to be able to float around. You want to be able to jump from table to table, talk to people, get a sense of people's experiences, and get a sense as a customer too, like, is there something that's not there? Is there not enough vintage? Is there not enough modern? Is there not enough of some specific sport? To get a sense, you want to be walking the floor pretty regularly and just talking to people, making people feel welcomed and understanding the reality of what's going on. So I think that's an important role for you, especially in the first one. Maybe over time, the system of things gets so smooth that that's not so necessary sometime down the road. But for the first show, the first couple of shows, you want to be flexible and you want to be able to float around as much as possible. So that's another suggestion I would have. All right, with that being said, this turned into another really long video. Sometimes when I'm just sitting here chatting about some topic, it goes on so long. I hope this is useful for you. This is much longer than I thought it would be, but I think it's useful if you're actually starting a card show. So maybe this will be a kind of an evergreen style of video for you, because I think you can learn over time. You can get better over time, but if you can start with a solid foundation, it's going to make the whole process so much easier. So that's what this video is for. I hope it's useful. Peace.